Welcome to The Decision from Nashville EO, where you will hear the rest of the story after tough decisions were made by entrepreneurs who faced adversity and lived to tell about it.
Welcome to The Decision, that moment in time where you're stuck and you need a little bit of help. This podcast is going to help teach you best practices on how to give an excellent deep dive, how to be coached, and how to coach. In this episode, episode 3, we're going to talk about how to be a great formate in a presentation. And with us today, we have Eric Jackson, 15 years in EO. I am Robert Hartline, 8 years. And then we have Colton Mulligan, who is an expert, like a form Sherpa or shaman? Which one are you?
I mean, that's just on the litany of things I am called. You know what I mean? Yeah, you named 2 of the 12. So
you're like this form pro, like you're almost certified, I hear.
Almost certified is exactly the way to do it. So I'm certified through Forum Sherpa with Ellie Bird, which means at this point over the last 4 years, I've worked with hundreds of EO, YPO, Harvard Business School Forum members facilitating retreats about getting to the 5%, getting value out of your forum, vision planning for yourselves, and, yada, yada, yada. And then hopefully, fingers crossed, by the time this podcast airs, hopefully, or thereabouts, I'll be officially EO certified through their facilitator trainer program.
If they need a recommendation, we will certainly write one, won't we, Eric?
I'll consider it.
Yeah, we'll do that for sure.
On the professional side, not personal. You wouldn't stand up for me in a court of law. But,
Yeah.
Now, if you're watching this episode, he said a lot of buzzwords just a moment ago, and I want to make sure if you want to get those buzzwords cleared up, see episode 1, episode 2. Yeah, there's a little bit of length in the podcast. There's a lot to learn. And I went in this experience with, let's say, an older set mindset of what it's like to be in form. And the reason we brought Colton here is some of the words and language has changed. And so when you're listening to this episode and you're going, why is he saying deep dive instead of a presentation? Well, that's the new terminology that you're using, right? When he says a 5% reflection, well, that's the new terminology for talking about updates and those types of things. In today's episode, what we're talking about essentially is being a great formate, receiving a deep dive, so you can help that coached deep dive, flow, so I can give some experience share that would benefit him. So walk us through some basics of being a good formate. What's just the basics here?
I already disagree with you.
Great.
Only because I think what you said is very fair. You said, how am I going to give an experience share that benefits them? I love to flip it to help with what I'm sure we'll get into, which is Gestalt and forum mindset. I tell people when you do your experience share, be selfish. You see what can you get out of your experience share by exploring the space. Because if I'm thinking about how am I going to benefit Robert with my experience share, I start to create an element of leverage. I can benefit you versus thinking, man, I'm going to use this opportunity to explore how the last time I had feelings, just like Robert did, the last time I was in this situation. And that whole idea that EO talks about now, which is the journey of self-discovery and group discovery, is one of the cornerstones that they talk about it by way of a deep dive.
Yeah, and when I started my EO experience, I started using this word Gestalt, that everyone was using this word Gestalt. And I've talked about Gestalt with other people outside of EO, and I described what Gestalt is. And one day I just went on this little Google journey to find a definition of Gestalt. And I was like, what does this have to do with anything what we're talking about? Because the definition is an organized whole that is perceived as more than the sum of its parts. That doesn't seem like anything. Where the hell did this term, Gestalt, come from?
Me and Vern Harnish, the father of EO, have not had this discussion. I need to, though, to ask him. But it's also, you're citing the reason why they've done away with it, and they now call it forum mindset. I don't know the actual reason. I'll give you my take on it. So real quick, Gestalt was like a form of psychology and a philosophy that they went through. That has almost nothing to do with forum. The term that they used, I think, is fair, and it's interesting. It's what I do like. Gestalt, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. The way I've historically explained it, which I just made up, is not, I can't quote this anywhere else, is humans are really actually pretty smart. And I'd like to think that most EO members are as well. And when you spoon feed someone all of the little ingredients of the thing, they will come away with a much better appreciation and understanding if you give them the whole. Tell them your whole experience rather than the direct pieces of advice, because that whole is how we learn best. We have to do a little of the work ourselves rather than just being spoon-fed all the little ingredients. So that's my take on it. But EO calls it forum mindset now, so we don't have to worry about it.
And, for me, I was in a CEO roundtable before I got into EO. And the structure that forum gave us with how to run a great forum experience and that level of process that exists was enlightening for me and helpful, because I had experiences in my CEO roundtable where a gray-haired dude that's been in business for 40 years, when he says something, right, and outside of his actual experience, he's giving advice that he has not journeyed through. I've listened to some really bad advice that I took because we look at the gray hair and go, this guy knows what he's talking about. I better do what he says, right? And I've been burned. And so it resonated with me, understanding what Gestalt at the moment, meant to me was like, there's a lot of value in actually hearing real stories assigned to this experience is way better than listening to, I should do this and that.
And that's why I love the idea of not putting the other person, helping them in when I'm giving feedback. It's like, I'm going to tell them what my experience was, and I'm going to explain it in some detail, and I'm not going to worry about solving that other person's problem. They're going to get more out of that than if I'm trying to riff on their issue. If I'm just talking about what I experienced, what the situation was before there was a problem, what the problem is, what the outcome was, and package that up, and here you go. You do what you want with it.
I catch myself outside of forum mindset, and I had to write this into the agenda that I now try to say every time before we do. I'm the moderator of our forum, and I try right before we are about to do experience shares, I try to always remind everybody, listen for your own value. I know I've flipped out of forum mindset when, as I'm listening to other experience shares, I'm thinking about the presenter, the person that had the topic. I'm thinking, how is this going to benefit them? And the whole point is, during this time, be selfish. I'm just listening to what you're saying, and I'm not thinking about whether or not you're helping to solve somebody else's problem. I am just thinking, what am I learning from what you're sharing?
They're going to interpret the way they're going to interpret your feedback. And they could get more. They're going to get probably more from it if you are being selfish. They're going to hear that story and not hear. It can sometimes be almost like a disguised advice or disguised attack on the person, or if you package it up right and it's all about you, they're able to look at it from a third party and gain knowledge, not what are they trying to tell me.
And I think it's amazing when you're going through that experience in your mind where you're taking yourself back to an experience that you actually had, and then you're trying to recount the feelings from the past. And as you start telling the story, it's so funny how you start unpacking and go, oh, I learned this about how I react to these types of things. But you don't actually remember the lesson until you've had enough time and space between to go, oh, wow, there's more to that experience than I thought, right? And it's like a lot of obstacles that we face in our business where you get hit with an obstacle and you're like, oh my gosh, the sky is falling. And ultimately, what you actually discover is that was a beautiful opportunity disguised as a major issue. And by acknowledging that you had this experience that was so awful, but if I had not gone down that path, I would have never met or done this or experienced this next thing. Because it's really, ultimately, don't you think it's like the purpose of why we are there is to learn others' lessons?
Yeah. It's why it's interesting. You talked about, so because I facilitate retreats with, at this point, hundreds of members, I've gotten to watch the way folks interact, and I've gotten to see what you're talking about, what I commonly refer to as, in our forum, we refer to it as the ringer or the heavy, which is the person that's like, oh, they're over 50 mil or they're at 100 mil. They've had their exit. Commonly, they may have gray hair or whatever. And when I'm facilitating retreats, sometimes I'll try and figure out who that is before, just a fun game I play in my head, who it is before we do intros and stuff. But it's interesting that you guys were talking about that. And I've seen the heavies fall on either side of it. There are those that will wind up doing experience shares, and I'm modeling open coaching and we're doing a deep dive. And I have actively heard people go, oh man, I'm going to need more time. I've got a lot of experience with this one. I've got a lot of things to share on this one. And I already know, like, we're going to have problems with forum mindset and this guy or gal. I have a, in my Remarkable 2 here, plug, go ahead and download that. Use coupon code. No. I've got a tagged element that says takeaways. And I've got that when somebody drops a real knowledge bomb, I put it in there. It is never the people that are trying to give advice. They're saying, man, 20 years ago, I had to start saying to myself, what is the energy I'm bringing into this room? Or something like that. I'm just throwing that out there. And those individuals, I love when I watch someone that has been an EO and they've got forum mindset and they are truly sharing their own experience and reflecting on, rather than just thinking about how am I going to help you. The knowledge that falls out of those people, man, I can't get a bucket big enough.
Mm. And, you know, so many times you're sitting in an experience share situation where, you know, we've all been there. You're like, okay, what do I got in my bucket of mistakes? What do I got in my library of stupidity that I could bring to the table? What if I got nothing in the library to share?
Shut up.
Have you ever ceded your time?
Yeah, probably not often enough. Because sometimes I start talking and telling, you know, giving feedback and go, man, this is really stupid. I should have passed it. I'm going to regret this.
We feel like we should be talking. Why is that?
We have ego needs and identity.
I think it goes back to wanting to help that person. It's like, oh gosh, I got to come up with something because I really feel for this person.
But help is nothing sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Help is just shutting up.
Mm-hmm. I say, I mean, sometimes I'll think after I've done my 3-minute experience share, and I should have just said, man, that sucks. Me too. What's the Mitch Hedberg joke where he says he's walking down the street and he said, I was walking down the street with my friend and the guy said, man, that sky looks trippy. And Mitch Hedberg says, maybe it is not that the sky is trippy, but instead it is the way that we perceive it that is indeed trippy. And then I thought, I should have just said, yeah. And I'm like, I think that every now and then I go, I should have just said, yeah.
It's kind of like saying, hey, how's it going?
Yeah.
Just say okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear the story.
It's fine. Except in forum where I want to hear the story.
You want to hear the story.
Mm-hmm.
You do want to hear the story.
Yeah.
And you know, getting that forum experience shared properly, sometimes it's best through the pain story, like having a real story behind it, because we forget about the emotions, right? But it's the emotions that get us to really get deeper in how we were really feeling and to bubble that emotion up so you can find out to the heart of, what was the outcome? Like, what was the real mistake that you made? Was the mistake that you went about the process wrong, or was the mistake in the decision, right, that you made?
Can I lean into something you just said just a second ago? You were talking, you both used the term relevance and resonance, which I think is great. EO is pushing that now as a thing to strive for resonance rather than relevance. Relevance is a direct experience that I have where there are facts of a situation that align. Resonance, especially around feelings, is that concept resonates with me, right? Like, and I'm sure it deals with sound and some, reverb or something fancy that I don't know. I'm not an audio engineer. You get it.
Vibration.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. Trust the guy. Yeah. Anyway,
guitars resonate. That's what makes the sound.
I trust a musician over myself when it comes to these things. So here's what I think is great when it comes to, yes, it is great to cede your time if you don't feel like you have a resonant experience. But I also think it's great at times when someone talks about, I've been in rooms where somebody says, I just found out that my brother just fell off the wagon after 7 years and he's fallen hard. And I'm trying to figure out how to intervene. And that winds up being, the element. And sometimes people say, what are the types of experience shares you're looking for? Well, have you had a sibling that has gone through, anxiety, depression, drug abuse, et cetera, and you've tried to help them? Or a resonant thing is to jump up a level that I think is still fair, and you don't have to cede your time if the group is open to it. When is a time when you have been more invested in somebody else's success than they were themselves? And how have you dealt with that? Which is still fair. It may have nothing to do with drug abuse or anything like that, but it has everything to do with the concept of boundaries, which is really what you're talking about there, the concept of boundaries and how invested am I in your success, and emotionally, what does that do? Does it strain our relationship when I want more for you than you want for yourself? And what are the outcomes of that? I think I would value something like that because at the end of the day, we're still talking about the same emotions and feelings that resonate. So
let me change directions just for a minute, because this is a challenge I've seen in multiple forms. Formate with the same problem every time they come to form. How do we navigate this as a form to say, oh my gosh, enough, decide now? Like, when are you going to decide? How many conversations do we need to have? I mean, am I a little emotional about this? Yes. Because, ultimately at the end of the day, I know people are ready to make a decision when they're ready to make a decision. I get it. But at the same time, how much energy should we devote to someone who loves to talk but takes no action?
Eric, you raised your hand on the repeated problem unresolved.
Yeah, I was that guy for a long time.
Well, do you want to share what it was?
I had this feeling that an experience that my business partner and I were not aligned, and that it wasn't working. So, I tried to make it work for many years, and we both had our problems, right? And we eventually decided to split. And my forum was probably happier than I was that this was finally over, that they wouldn't have to listen to me anymore, talk about, this problem that I could have fixed. Ultimately, it was my reticence to do it was two things. Number one, I was just afraid of not having a business partner. And number two, I like being on a team. And so I felt like I was giving something up, having that experience. I've been able to replicate that through having a leadership team and trusting people with a lot of responsibility, that aren't an owner. So yeah, it's I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to pull the Band-Aid off and take that next step. And there was nothing anybody could do to make me.
Now, if you could go back, because that was a reoccurring issue, could something have happened in coaching or during that process of your deep dive that you could have gotten there faster? And just because is it that the deep dives just didn't work because you kept bringing it, and it just didn't work? Or you think they could have done something differently?
I think no, I don't think so. I mean, ultimately, I just needed my partner to say, I don't think this is working either. And I think we should split.
Did the decision with no decision.
Decision by indecision.
Which took a really long time. A great prophet once said, how does it go? Even if you don't make a choice, even if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. Neil Peart wrote that, I think. Rush. Anyway, yeah,
The musician again with jokes that we're not,
that is, I see this over and over, and I ask myself, what do you do in that situation? Because I've heard this situation from the same individual 3 times. They're not moving. Move. You just want to inspire them for action, but we're not walking that.
For me, just looking back, I think that a good question would have been, what is holding you back from choosing to do something different than what you're doing now?
Mm.
Or questions of that sort of just, what's the feeling behind
you
this?
wish someone had gone deeper.
Yeah.
I don't have a best practice for this. So when you say like, what is the answer? I know one thing that helps. So when I do facilitations and retreats that deal with vision, goal setting, life planning, life design, and they're going to share that with the group, a really important question that I have everybody ask at the end is, what do you want from the group? Or on a scale of 1 to 10, what level of accountability do you want? A 10 is, I'm going to do it in my 5% reflection, and I want you to ask me, and I want you to say, hey, Colton, shit or get off the pot, buddy. That's a 10. A 1 is, I don't even want you to ask me. If I bring it up, you can go, thanks for sharing, at best. I am a 1. I don't like accountability. Don't you ask me about my shit. I have got my own complicated relationship with accountability, right?
Interesting.
So my group knows. Now, granted, I'm being somewhat I'm not really being facetious, but I'm speaking in hyperbole here. In reality, I want people to ask me about things, but I think it is really, really key that you understand the culture of your forum and what you've set as ground rules, and if people are different. I've heard it said, hey guys, we're a group of high-performing professionals, entrepreneurs. What is this group, if not a place to hold each other accountable for high performance? I believe that is probably Michael Burcham's forum because I know the way that they roll with KPIs and they're on it, right? I know others that say, I've got accountability groups. That's not what I have here. I'm looking for relationship and I'm looking for empathy right here. So,
yeah, and you bring up something that's important to me is I want to be called out. I don't want to, but I need to be. And I recognize that not maybe at the moment of you calling me out, but in reflection, it definitely will shake me up when someone is like, Robert, this is the 3rd time that you've talked about you've chosen nothing. Like, dude, where are we going?
One of the benefits, I think, of having a forum that has existed for 15 years is that we have had several of those experiences, and we've actually nicknamed them so that we can bring up the nickname of that particular indecision to a person to communicate to everybody else. Hey, you don't want it to be X. I can't use the words on this podcast, but it
don't be a
right.
Okay,
Is this
I get it.
Is this your version of insert name here?
Yeah.
And you go, oh wow, I hadn't thought about it that way.
Yeah,
I'm gonna add. You're not gonna believe this. Can you believe that you guys are offering me value? You know what I mean? I didn't think that coming into this thing. Yeah. I'm literally going to add something to my parking lot. I need to explore. I was thinking about this. My whole forum knows Colton doesn't want accountability. Don't do that. He'll give updates and stuff like that. And you can ask him about it and we can have a conversation. And they'll say, oh, why haven't you done that yet? I need to explore why I have a complicated relationship with accountability and why, I get elevated emotionally when I'm in that space. And I realize nobody else in my forum is. They fall on a spectrum. And folks like yourselves, yeah, man, kick my ass. Ask me why I haven't moved. I think it's fine for there to be a spectrum. I need to explore why I'm so extreme on my end of it. And I'm going to make it a parking lot item.
I'm an EOS implementer, and they teach us, it's called, entering the danger zone. And if you want an outcome of any sort that is anything meaningful, you got to create a little bit of tension and uncomfortable conversations. And I'll be willing to bet Colton actually does pretty well with being called out. I mean, I think at the end of the day, would find it valuable in a week after maybe I called you out. You may have been frustrated, angry with me, whatever, for calling you out. But I think in reflection, you would be like, well, I'm better off.
To be clear, it never gets me angry. It's that I'm too dismissive, which probably deals with ego and arrogance and all that stuff, which is obviously issues that I can dive into. But that's my issue. Very little pisses me off. There's a lot that I can be dismissive of because I'm working on EQ every day.
Yeah. So, when it comes to the form experience, how do you deal with someone who's boring? Did I say the boring word?
Yeah, you did.
Someone who's boring?
Well, it's
they're not going to the 5%. Is that what you mean?
Well, they're not bringing enough to the table in terms of an actual solvable. They're not coming with a deep dive that is. It's almost like they just pulled it out of the trunk of their car and they have been driving around it for weeks, but it's not meaningful.
Especially when they've got bigger problems to be discussing.
It's like, why are we even talking about this? Like, the elephant in the room is this thing here. Let's talk about that. But I know we're not supposed to do that, but you see what I'm saying.
When you guys do your 5% reflections at the end, do you guys rank importance and urgent?
That's something we have neglected to do in our form. This really makes me reconsider the way I think, honestly, as I've done these now 3 episodes, I'm looking at my form in a completely different light. And to be real, I think I've been needing more value out of my form experience. And this conversation has made me go, oh gosh, we got these things. We need a retreat now.
If you guys, so if forums aren't doing impromptu presentations, then the need for it isn't as strong. But if you think about it, if it's a 5% reflection, you got 8 people in your forum, and they're all going to share 3 things, then you got 24 topics, right? And okay, how are you going to get down to it? Ours has an actual equation at the bottom of our form, and it says on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is your number 1 topic? On a scale of 1 to 10, how urgent is it? Important gets multiplied twice, and then you add it, and then it gives you a very simple, well, these are the scores at the end of the time. Granted, and it's very difficult for folks, that is not necessarily the be-all, end-all, but it gives you the default to go to after everybody's done with their 5% and you're determining your impromptu presentations. It gives you a framework to start off with. All right, well, Robert, you were a 27 about that issue with your dad. Are you comfortable? Are you in a space to do that, or does that need to be a parking lot item for later?
And what... Go ahead.
I want to say that my forum voted on who should do an impromptu presentation in the past. Like we would hear all the different issues that were brought up in, well, not issues, but reflections, and then we would make a list of the ones that seemed to be the most hot, and then vote on those.
Yeah, and it's just in hearing this conversation, I used the wrong word because I said boring. And in reflection, what I'm really saying is I'm recognizing that they weren't giving us the 5%, and what they presented was fake. Here's this thing. I'm going to put a screen in here. We're going to talk about this thing, but everybody knows who's behind the curtain, and not really having that. So it kind of reminded me on going deeper, and really maybe that conversation happens in the parking lot when we're going to talk about what's the issue, and being willing to go, all right, you've had this on the parking lot for, we keep bringing it and it's back on this parking lot. Like, can we have a conversation why that's on the parking lot 3 times in the last 5 years?
We actually have a secretary who records the things that we're talking about with each 5% reflection / update. And he'll go back and say, well, a year ago, this happened. 2 years ago, this happened. 3 years ago, this happened. And you can see patterns.
That's how a forum stays together for 15 years, I bet.
That's right. We're keeping it spicy.
I like it. No, that's awesome. I mean, I really do think that's a best practice that most forums don't invest in, the time and the role.
Record keeping.
He's our permanent secretary.
I love that. Can I add one little thing to the ratings there that helps? And it sounds like it might be similar to what you're doing. We find a lot of value in this. Alex Tolbert was our seed moderator, and he modeled this for us, and I loved it. And so I stick it in very few forums I found do this. But you do your 5% reflections at the very end. The scribe goes back through, and this can take way too much time if you don't make it truly just this. But if this was a forum of the three of us and I was the scribe and we all did our stuff, at the very end when we're all done, I say, okay, let's see, Robert, your three things were that thing with your dad, your business tax issue, and retirement planning. And then we'd go to your left and I'd say, Eric, of those three things, what do you think would be good for Robert to present on? Mm-hmm. And then you tell me what yours is, I do it, and then it goes back to you. And it's not a voting system as much as you get to hear it. Here's what's interesting, is that it gives everybody, I call it like putting a little English on it. So you might have said the dad issue, right? And he goes, the dad issue. And I may say, very briefly, I may say the dad issue, but specifically living up to expectations of others. And then it gives you, I can't tell you how valuable that is. And sometimes even if I'm not the presenter, my buddy Bo did this to me recently where I was talking about problems and stuff like that. And he said, not dealing with problems, but he goes, being the guy. I was like, what do you mean? He goes, you either put yourself in or find yourself in a lot of situations where people use this phrase, throw it over the fence. Colton will solve it. Do this. And over our time together in forum, he spotted it. And I was like, holy cow. Either I've got a Superman complex or this or that. And I didn't even present that day. Immediately went onto my parking lot only because he had the opportunity to reflect and know me and just say, hey, I'd like to present. And while everybody else said X problem, he said being the guy. And I was like, this is deep. This is great.
That's when you got the right formates asking the right questions at the right time to help you get there. Changing direction just a tad. Clearing rounds. Talk about clearing rounds. What's that all about?
Man, I love clearing rounds. Can I talk about why it's important real quick?
All of that.
So here's why clearing rounds are necessary.
And what is a clearing round, first off? Explain that.
A clearing round is a great way to open up a meeting. I say put 10 minutes on the agenda for it. I will be honest. If people haven't been doing clearing rounds, and I train clearing rounds at every retreat, commonly, I've been in times where the clearing round was supposed to take 10 minutes, where I model it, they do it, it's taken 90 minutes. We have lost, and they're paying, I'm $5,500 for an 8-hour session, and we burn 90 minutes or 2 hours of vision and life planning because there was some shit they had not dealt with yet. Unfortunately, I think it's healthy. It's a good use of time, but if people had healthy clearing rounds, they wouldn't do that. Clearing round is, as we go into it, the point of it is to say, is there anything, any tension, any judgment, anything from me where I've been offended, or maybe I feel like there's something I should apologize for or something you should apologize for that is stopping me from showing up as my full self and being able to perceive any of your experiences without judgment right now, right? And so what clearing rounds are, practically, is we would open up, and if it was us, I have to point at you and look you in the eye and say, Robert, I'm clear with you. Eric, I'm clear with you. Kevin, I'm clear with you. Billy, I'm clear with you. Ashley, I'm clear with you. And then the thing I've added that is not necessarily in like EO playbook, I call it the self-clear, one of the best tools where I think in my relationship to the forum itself, is there anything I need to clear? And that right there is one of the vehicles that lowers the conflict barrier, because I'm probably going to say something right now and the group has a chance to respond to it. Where, like, to give very practical examples, there's times where I've said, hey, this isn't one individual, but as moderator, we've talked about having forum mindset and gestalt. I did a bad job last time of calling everybody out for that, and I need to be better about it. To be honest, the other way I could have done that is you were breaking gestalt, and you were breaking gestalt, and it gives others the chance to talk about that thing that otherwise would be tense, because I don't know if you've been moderator and called people out on it. I've had people harumph at me and roll their eyes when I say, no you statements, only I statements. Hey, I need you to restate that, right? It helps lower that tension, because otherwise that shit mounts. You know what I mean? So that's one example, but man, different political, religious beliefs, all the things that can happen in a forum now that can lower the transparency and vulnerability because all these defenses and judgment is going up. It's exactly what clearing rounds are for.
And it's creating some level of conflict that gets people having maybe a heated conversation. And that gives some trust that, hey, we know that people will say something difficult. We want difficulty in a conversation sometimes.
Gallup StrengthsFinder says that healthy conflict is intentional, is one of the things that they found from researching like 80,000 workplaces and all that stuff. I don't know if I was going to say it's enough of a problem, but obviously EO is blowing up, especially in the Nashville chapter. So I don't know that it's fair to say it's a problem, but it's at least an issue to address that so I was facilitating retreats through COVID, and between 2018 through now 2022, the number of things going on in the world, whether it's social justice or religious, political, etc., the types of tension that were rising got to be enough that I was brought in by a chapter to do a 4-hour boost with every single forum in that chapter and the spouse and life partner forums, just about special curriculum, 4 hours on conflict, communication, and clearing. And it had how to apologize like an adult. It had everything from a bid system from Gottman, which deals with marriage and interpersonal things, how to judge the subtleties when someone's trying to do relationship repair, all this stuff that's super helpful. I'm going down a rabbit hole, but I obviously care about it.
This has been great, Colton. I want to say thank you for taking the time to spend with Eric and I to rediscover what it means to have a deep dive conversation, how to be coached, and most importantly, how to receive a great forum presentation to provide value for those of us in making the decision.
Thanks for listening to the Decision Podcast by Nashville EO. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.